Hey everyone, and welcome to our webinar on immigration for the How to Connect webinar series. We are going to have just a few of these webinars left in our series. The next one is going to be about the Electoral College. Then we're going to have one about local elections and the cost of free speech. And again, all of this is leading up to the midterms in 2018. So I want to welcome our two speakers today. But before I do that, there is a link in the description for this video for a pre-quiz, and I'd like all of you to take that while these two ladies are introducing themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to our speakers, Angela Thurman and Olivia Llanes.
Good afternoon. I'm Angela Thurman. I teach economics here at TCC Connect, and I'm going to be talking about immigration from the point of view of an economist. Olivia?
Yes, good afternoon. I teach government at TCC Southeast Campus, and I'm currently even teaching class right now. And something that I like to stress to my students is that I always try to have a neutral view, especially in immigration. My job is just to give you information that will make you shape your point of view, especially on immigration, because it's a big issue in America.
Thank you, Olivia and Angela. I want to apologize to everyone. We did have a little bit of a delay at the start. It looks like most of you are finding your way back online. You did have to back all the way out of the video and then try to reload it. Super sorry for that technical delay. All right, so we talk a lot about this in civic engagement and civil discourse, about being able to discuss an issue and to talk about it with facts and with a lot of respect for everyone involved. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this webinar on immigration. This is a topic that's often very uncomfortable for people to talk about, or it's a topic that a lot of people can get heated about very quickly. It's something you hear about on the news quite a bit, but without a lot of nuance. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about two experts, Angela in economics and Olivia in government, and they're going to help us break down this issue so that we have the facts and we really, really understand it. All right, so Angela, we consider ourselves to be a nation of immigrants.
That is true. So the United States was built on the back of immigrants. Are we still a nation of immigrants? So this slide from U.S. News and World Reports shows that, in fact, we are. That the percentage of the United States that is born outside the country is growing. And you can see from 1990 to last year, which is when these numbers were compiled, the numbers have almost doubled. So where are these people coming from? When you hear about immigration, where do you think that the immigrants are coming from? So one of the questions on the pre-quiz asks that. So I'm going to ask Misty to go back and look and see what people thought, where people think that most of the immigrants are coming from.
So looking at the results of the quiz that have come in so far, I want to say that about 80% of you guys say that you're hearing about immigration either every day or every week in the news, which I think is accurate.
Yeah, I think
pretty
so
much
too.
And then most of you are saying that the news coverage is not that nuanced and not that full. But as far as which countries we think the majority of our immigrants are coming from, it looks like you guys are saying Mexico, Guatemala, and Brazil. So Angela, are they correct?
Well, yes and no. So the number of immigrants that are coming from Mexico makes up more than a quarter of foreign-born residents. However, making the assumption that all of the immigrants are from South and Central America is not correct. As you can see from this list, although Mexico is the single biggest source, China and India are catching up quickly. And as a matter of fact, from last year to this year, China and India have increased even more than this chart shows. So does that surprise you guys? Does it surprise you that a lot of immigrants are coming from Asia? Here's another list. So this list, the top 11, and what I want you to look at here is how things changed from 1990 to today. So Mexico is still number one. However, Puerto Rico was number two in 1990. They've fallen to number 5. And China was number 4, and they're now number 2. And look at India. India was 13, and now they are number 3. So we are seeing more and more immigrants coming from Asia. And the Asian immigration numbers are expected to equal and surpass the numbers from Mexico, maybe within the next few years. So why is that? Why are we seeing more immigrants coming from Asia?
Well, and that's getting into motivations, right? Why people immigrate.
Right. Why do people immigrate? Does everyone immigrate? Because a lot of people think that people immigrate because they want to come here and they want to sort of take advantage of the United States. They want to use our services. They want to use medical. They want to get a free education. They basically want a free ride. Is that correct?
Well, I think if we look at the countries on this list, we can see that there's multiple motivations to come, right?
I agree.
If somebody is living in, let's say, Juarez, which has had quite a problem with drug cartels, they might be coming not for an economic benefit, but to escape some sort of violence.
True.
And if you look on some of these countries lower down on the list, Vietnam, massive Vietnamese immigration started with what?
Vietnam War.
Vietnam War. If we look at El Salvador, there's violence there, right? If you look at the Philippines and the United States have had this really close relationship since 1902. So a lot of that is probably more familiar relationships or business partnerships. Same thing with Puerto Rico, right?
Right.
So we're seeing a wide variety of motivations here for reasons people might want to integrate.
True. And if you look at India, India's number 3 on our list right now. There's something that economists call the brain drain. And I think India is experiencing that. A lot of people from India will come here either already with an education or they'll come here to get an education and then they stay. So the brain drain refers to all of the best and the brightest in a country leaving. And why would they come to the United States? Why would people from India come to the United States instead of staying in India or instead of going to Europe or another country? Well, the reason is because of economic advantages. People come here because of what we call the American dream, the chance to make it rich, to come here and not be under the same type of social and religious injustice and persecution, and also because they can make a lot more money.
All right, so Angela, as our economist, I'm going to ask you, this is a thing we hear about all the time in the news, right? That
Yes.
Immigrants cost money to the nation.
Yep.
Can you break that down and tell us what's really going on there with the financial impact of immigrants to this country?
Yes. So first thing to realize is for someone to come over here, for someone to leave their country, that requires a lot of courage. It requires a leap of faith. So that tells us that most of the people that come here, either legally or illegally, have a pretty strong constitution, and that translates into a very strong work ethic. So immigrants come over here to work. They don't come over here to just sit back and get on welfare, which they couldn't do anyway. So the fact that immigrants are more likely to be entrepreneurial, they are more likely to come over here to work, tells us that on average at the federal level, so the aggregate level, immigrants actually give back more than they take. However, that's not true on the state and local level. And why is that? I'm going to let Olivia talk about why the states might have a different view than the federal government on the cost of immigrate. Olivia?
Yes. Sorry, I thought we were going to change the slide.
Oh, that's okay.
I can do that. I changed the slide.
No, well, I just wanted to talk about really briefly of state and local. The thing is that, for instance, a lot of people in the United States don't relate to Texas because we're the first ones to address the issue with immigration. Like, for instance, even like the children that are separated from their parents at the border, they are placed in the health department, you know, the foster care system. And that's a burden for like taxpayers in the sense, because now they have to provide for the foster care system. But that's the thing, that all these other benefits that they might, like even in some cases, like in Texas, you know, that they say, oh, we don't want some undocumented immigrants to receive free education. Okay, because that's taxpayer money. But that's the thing. We always are going to see like Texas has to deal with a lot of more immigration in California, New Mexico, Arizona, because we're in the border. And up north, they probably don't know like if there's any immigrants in their state because it's not a great burden.
So you're saying nobody wants to live in North Dakota?
Now there is something that I wanted to point out, Angela, that you mentioned, was about the children that, like the parents that if they receive welfare, you're correct, they don't receive welfare. But if they have U.S. children, they could receive welfare through the children. So that is something also that a lot of people say, well, at the end of the day, they still receive some benefits because the child cannot be deprived from benefits because they are U.S. citizens. And it doesn't mean that the parents are going to receive the benefit, but the child is. So they cannot deprive them.
Olivia, I think that's a great jumping off point. Can you tell us what makes those children that are born here actual American citizens?
So in the sense of me, while they're being born in U.S. land.
Right, based on what document or amendment or law?
So that is established more in the 14th Amendment, since it grants citizenship. It was the same thing with the slaves, since they were brought over here in the U.S. So a lot of them they didn't have anyone that could petition that they could acquire citizenship. So they granted them citizenship. Of course, if their children were born in the U.S., even then the slaves didn't have that right to be U.S. citizens.
Right. So the 14th Amendment was passed right after the end of the Civil War, and it granted former Black male slaves citizenship and therefore the right to vote, which is critical. And our expansion of voting rights and citizenship since then, so if you're female, the 19th Amendment, stems from the 14th Amendment.
Woohoo!
Yeah. This is something we're very supportive of, right?
Yes.
So the 14th Amendment gives us birthright citizenship. If you're born within the confines of the United States, you are an American citizen. Or if you're born on an army base outside of the United States.
Like me.
And actually, also, if you can acquire or derive citizenship, like for instance, Ted Cruz, he wasn't born in the U.S., he was born in Canada, but he acquired citizenship through his father.
Right. So his parents were American citizens. It's like a birthright.
Yeah. Right. All right. So could you see that the 14th Amendment is actually almost advertising for immigrants of all countries to come here and have their babies on U.S. soil? Because, Olivia, I think what you were referring to is sometimes known as chain immigration. Yeah. So what do you think about the point that maybe the 14th Amendment has sort of outlived its usefulness?
We're not saying that anybody believes that. It's just a point that's brought up in the media sometimes, or should be discussed.
That they shouldn't be allowed to be born in the U.S. and acquire citizenship if they're U.S. If their parents are not U.S. citizens.
Correct.
Right? I mean, because we look at that like a Great Britain, they're a lot more strict than our immigration laws.
Right.
And that's something about Great Britain that they say, no, even if you don't have your parents are U.S. citizens, Great Britain citizens, then you do not acquire that citizenship, even if you're born in land. Now, over here in America, yes, that is something that a lot of people do go through the process. I mean, I've worked in this area and I did see it. However, a lot of people don't understand that it's a lot more difficult when you're trying to become legal, especially right now, because they can consider it as fraud, even if your child is petitioning you, and they can deport the parents. I mean, there is a slide that we're going to talk about, like what can parents do if they have U.S. citizen children, and that's where I want to hit. that point of view that it's not as easy as a lot of people think it is.
All right.
Gain citizenship.
So before we move on to that, I did want to just point out, Angela found this slide for us. We are not the only country people immigrate to. Actually,
yes,
some Americans.
Yes, they immigrate away from the United States. So you see that these are the top 6 foreign countries and territories that Americans like to move to. And surprise, surprise, Mexico is at the top of the list. So the reason for that, of course, is the exchange rate and the cost of living. So the reason that Americans would go to Mexico is that their dollar will go farther. And there's a lot of what they call expatriated Americans that live in these foreign countries because their money goes farther and their standard of living is higher than if they retired here in the United States. So it's just something to think about.
And less business regulation.
Yes,
good
yes,
point.
Exactly.
And less business regulation, especially in Mexico.
All right. So, Olivia, this is kind of your expertise here. Can you tell us what is an undocumented immigrant?
Yes. So the thing is that a lot of people don't understand that undocumented immigrants, they can come in legally in the U.S., not just border crossing. And the thing is that immigration law has even stated them as alien or foreign nationals. And now that it's used the word undocumented, yes, you can hear people use the word illegal, right? And a lot of people will say, well, that's a negative connotation. The thing is that immigration doesn't even use that word in their own laws, their immigration laws. They do refer to them as alien, foreign nationals, and undocumented immigrants, meaning people that don't have a legal status to be in the U.S.
Olivia, some of the students are saying they're having a little bit of trouble hearing you. Would you be able to just speak up a little bit more?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry.
Would you like for me to repeat that again?
Yeah, if you could, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So the thing is that a lot of people they don't understand that, for instance, if we have heard the word illegal very often, and even on TV, but the thing is that even for immigration purposes, like immigration law, they don't use the word illegal, right? These are people that come into the country either without permission or they lose that status, that some coverage, that they are not undocumented. So you will hear me refer to them as undocumented or alien or foreign nationals. There is some court cases that even Supreme Court justices use the word illegal. You know, because it's common, but the thing is that it could be led as a bad connotation for some individuals. So as you will hear me throughout these slides, I will be referring to them as undocumented immigrants.
Thank you, Olivia.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Angela, do you want to give us some of the statistics here?
Yeah. So as you can see, there are over 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the United States. So these are oftentimes family members of legal immigrants. So again, we talked about chain migration. So maybe the number one, you'll see that 85% of Latino undocumented immigrants have at least one family member who is a U.S. citizen. Now that can be a child, that can be a spouse, that can be a parent. And if you go down, you see 40% of undocumented immigrants entered legally and then overstayed their visa. So this is a huge problem. And it's not just a problem because of the tax burden, but I would like to just touch back onto 9/11. Every single one of those terrorists entered as a student on a student visa and overstayed their visa, and then they got lost. The system just lost them. So this is a serious problem. 2/3 of undocumented immigrants have been here for over a decade. So that's where we come up with, should there be a path to legalization for these people who have basically grown up here? There's a lot of people who've lived here their whole life. So would it be right to send those people back to their country of origin if they've already been here? So that's one side of the coin. The other side is, well, are we going to reward them? They broke the law. Should there be some sort of a punishment? So there definitely, there's two sides to this, this argument. All right, so now we can go back to Olivia with this next slide.
So Olivia, we wanted to ask you about what's going on with the rate of immigration. We're hearing about it in the news all the time. So immigration has to be just like through the roof, right?
In the sense of what reference, like border crossing, or?
Yes, we hear about that all the time, right? Illegal border crossings. So it's got to be like millions of people if we're hearing about it every day in the news.
And that's the error there. And that's why I always tell my students, you have to do your research. You cannot believe everything the media is saying. Like in both ways, either in a conservative TV show or in a very liberal TV show, it doesn't matter. Do your research. So the thing that I wanted to point out to students at this moment is that a lot of people, the first thing that they think of, and even our President Trump has stressed, right, is that border wall. Okay, that border wall that's going to cost us billions of dollars. The thing is that I want to stress out to students that is that really necessary, a border wall? Because as you can see on this slide, 90% of border crossing has declined on our southwest border. That's where our border wall is going to be built. So the thing is, like, why can't we use those resources in other places? For instance, like Angela said, in which if we move on to the next slide, you will be able to see that the majority of our undocumented people, they came in with visas. They came through airplane.
Wait, so you're saying a wall wouldn't keep an airplane out?
Have to be a really big wall.
Right? But that's, and so much, yes, you can build the wall for symbolism, but the thing is that we need resources. We have other focuses that there's, for instance, like I mentioned, the foster care system here in Texas is a huge issue. And instead of building a wall, we should be focusing on those issues, or any other necessity like education. But the thing is that a lot of people have that misconception of, yes, let's create that wall because it would prevent individuals from coming, but they're not coming from there. They're using these visas, which if you can see in this slide of legal entry, 2016. So it's very hard for immigration. Okay, they're always backlogged. I will tell you this, they're always backlogged. So the only updated information that you can see online is 2016. So I even got this from Department of Homeland Security, and they tell you that they inspected 50 million entries, okay, in 2016. That's a lot of people coming into the country. But 628,000 of them overstayed their visas. That means like these people did not check out the country. Like they didn't turn in their permit of visitor, student, employment. So it's not just visitors, but it's even people that come in with student visas or employment visas. And there's other categories that they come in with. But that's the thing. So all these people, like 2/3 of them are in a year constantly become undocumented. So it's not that they don't ask permission to come in. They are asking permission to come in, but they're overstaying their visas.
So maybe one solution might be to strengthen the laws and penalize businesses for hiring people that do not have the correct documentation. Then you cut it off from that end. If there's no demand for these workers, then we should see the workers leave.
Yeah, so in place right now, the majority, technically every business is supposed to have E-Verify, which is supposed to, the business owner is supposed to update it to let them know if their worker is currently legal in the US, has a legal status. But there's a lot of ways to go around it, because if you don't want to pay an employee like the actual minimum wage or even provide them benefits, you're going to find a way to go around that.
True.
All right, so the next point you wanted to discuss was going back to an idea that we kind of already briefly touched on, but U.S. citizen children and then their parents, right?
Yes. So as you can see, I placed on this slide that 4.1 million U.S. citizen children under the age of 18 live with at least one undocumented parent. Okay, so 4.1 million children. live with one parent, okay, that's undocumented, meaning they don't have a legal status, they are most likely going to be deported. Okay, they run the risk of being deported. Now, here's the thing: do they have options as that parent? So the first option, the adjustment of status, that means that those parents don't have to leave the country. They can become legal in the country, but they have to wait until that child turns 21. Okay, and then that process now used to be 4 to 6 months. Now it's taking longer because of the backlog in immigration, and they're doing a lot more thorough on their applications. Mind this, I will tell you, they do thorough on applications, but the thing is that now they're going really in depth, so they're taking a lot longer. So it might take more than a year, but they have to wait on those children to turn 21 in order to start the process. Now, that's if you came in with the visa. That's an adjustment of status. If you came in with the visa, like a legal entry. Here's the other option. If you want to become legal and you came in, let's say those border crossers that we said, you came in without permission into the country, you will have to leave the country at least 10 years. At least 10 years. So you have to go, those parents have to go back to their country for at least 10 years and ask for a waiver from over there. Okay, and they have to wait until an immigration officer looks at it and they say, okay, we can see the suffrage that your child is going to suffer. But remember, this child now is 21 years old. So it's a lot more difficult to prove that your child depends on you when they're 21 years old. So those are very, very difficult. And half the time, these people are very old and they don't want to go back to Mexico because they have their life here and they have their children here. So they say, I'll just rather stay undocumented instead of leaving the country. And there's a possibility that you might not come back because immigration is not going to approve that waiver.
So for people who are immigrants, what rights do they have in the United States? I know they can't vote, right, because they're not citizens, but what other rights do they have?
Okay, so the 14th Amendment grants protection from federal government and state government from infringing individual rights. And a lot of people, the first thing, especially when you hear political debates, especially since the November elections are coming up, there is a lot of, let's say, connotation about how undocumented immigrants, they broke the U.S. law by entering or overstaying their visas, so why should they be protected under the Constitution? Why should their rights be protected? And that's the thing. If you were able to look at the next slide, you will be able to see all these court cases that the Supreme Court basically says that 14th Amendment that says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, and property. These Supreme Court cases basically are saying it does not apply to U.S. citizens only. It applies to even undocumented people. Because they say those are persons or aliens. It doesn't matter, but they are human beings. So they are protected under the 14th Amendment, under the Constitution. They have their rights as well. And if you look at the very last bullet, I talk about how even in criminal and civil cases, the 5th, the 14th Amendment, the 1st, the 6th, which the 1st is the freedom of religion, the press, assembly, speech. 4th, unreasonable searches and seizures. 5th, self-incrimination, double jeopardy. And 6th, speedy trial and counsel. So they are still even offered these same protections, even if they're undocumented. Now, and that's the thing. That's a risk that sometimes they take, though, because it depends on the police station, because they run the risk that if they say anything or even show up, they can detain them and deport them. So a lot of people don't want to do that. Now, here's the thing, deportation. We did talk about, really quickly, I did want to mention, yes, they are not allowed to vote. They're not allowed to have some government jobs. And then also they don't have the right to bear arms, the gun ownership. That's something that undocumented immigrants don't have that right. Now, for deportation, immigrants can fight deportation through civil proceedings. So if someone's placed in deportation, meaning the government, a judge tells them, no, you're going to have to leave the country. What happens there is that you can appeal your case there's two things with that. If you want to appeal your case, you're going to have to provide your own attorney, because we need to understand that immigration law is very different to criminal law. There's two different things, two different topics, subjects, categories. So immigration law, you're not granted a counsel. You have to provide your own counsel. So the thing is that attorney is going to cost more than $20,000. Okay, their minimum payment, okay, that they would request is $20,000 for immigration proceedings, because it requires a lot of work. And that's probably just one court showing. And then there's other ones that you have to be able to provide substantial evidence that you have ties here to the U.S. But it's very, very difficult, because you have to provide extreme hardship that unless you have someone like your child in the hospital or your spouse in the hospital that are immediate family members, then that's whenever you can actually prove that you can't leave the country. But other than that, they're going to keep you on, like, let's say, on schedule to see you in the future to see if they're already done with any medical condition so that they can deport you, in a sense. So it's especially right now, it's very difficult to fight those deportation proceedings. Now, and like I said, it's going to take years. So people can be here up to 10 years fighting their case. But eventually, they're going to have to know that they're going to have to leave the country, especially if you have a removal proceeding, notice of action. Now, here's the thing also that I wanted to hit really quickly was a zero tolerance. That's whenever President Trump came into office, he put in place zero tolerance. And that's the thing. Okay, normally, whenever you're stopped at the border and the border crossing, you get detained and you get released. And there can be some incarceration if you have tried it multiple times. But it's only in immigration purposes. Like, for instance, if that person ends up marrying a U.S. citizen, that means it's going to be a lot more difficult for them to become legal, okay, because they were caught in the border or even in the U.S. The other thing that's going to be an issue is that with the zero tolerance, not only is it immigration issues, now it's also criminal. So if you ever want to become legal, not only are you going to have the issues of immigration, of you trying to cross or being undocumented here, is also the criminal issues, which is a huge factor when you're trying to become legal. If they find out you have a misdemeanor already in the U.S. or a felony if there's repeated offenders.
So I wanted to ask you guys a couple of the questions that our students gave us from our pre-webinar survey. And a few have asked this question, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it at the beginning. Why do y'all think that the immigration process takes so long? And because it takes so long, does that increase people coming to this country without documentation? Olivia?
I believe it discourages people. I don't think it actually makes people to come in undocumented. The thing is, like, it's very hard to come in undocumented. Like, already the system that's in place, especially the patrolling of the Border Patrol, it's very difficult to come in undocumented. It's a lot more difficult to even find job as an undocumented person. Now, is it possible? Yes, you can. Now, here's the other thing. The backlog is occurring because a lot of people now are scared. I volunteer during the weekends doing citizenship applications, and there's people that have been residents, meaning this is a process. You become a resident first. You're a resident for 5 years, and you show good moral character and everything. You pay your taxes. You don't do anything bad. And then in 5 years, you can apply for citizenship. Okay, so I have people that are residents for like 35 years, but they're applying for citizenship now just because they're scared that there could be a possibility of deportation. So you'll see that all these people are doing it because of the way that the perception of everyone's getting deported, in a sense.
Now, Olivia, I have a question. When you say that they have to be a resident for 5 years, you're talking about legal immigrants, right? Yeah. So for an illegal immigrant, there really is no path. Is that correct?
So they're
undocumented, sorry.
No, it's okay. No, it's fine. Undocumented immigrants, they have a legal path if they have a U.S. citizen spouse or a U.S. citizen child. Now, you can do even the path of the parents or the path of brothers and sisters, but it's going to take, right now, it's taking like 20 years.
Wow.
It's taking 20 years. So the fastest way that you can become legal is if you're married to a U.S. citizen or you have a child that turns 21 and is able to petition you. But that's the whole thing, though. It also matters how you came into the country.
Right.
Because and then you're going to have repercussions or consequences of you even trying to become legal.
Okay.
All right, so this is probably the next most popular question that we got on the pre-survey, and I do see you guys typing on the chat, so I'll get to those questions in a second. But this question is, does immigration have a negative effect on the ability of Americans to get a good paying job? And I combined a bunch of questions there to make it one coherent question.
Okay, so this is what I tell my students. I would be concerned about immigration if all the immigrants came in with a master's degree in economics. That would threaten me. However, I am not threatened because most of the people that are coming in for low-paying jobs. So does that threaten the typical American worker? Well, if the typical American worker was taking those jobs, then there would not be a demand that would lead to people coming in undocumented. So if we want to slow down the flow, it's all about supply and demand. Those people come here for a better life. They come here because they can get a job. And if they can come here and get a job and make more money than they can in their home country, then they're going to keep coming. So you say, oh, well, they're stealing my job. Well, then you need to go out there and you need to apply for those jobs. So most of the people that are listening to this are in college. So those entry-level positions probably are not the jobs that you're going to be applying for. So I'm going to say that they are not taking jobs away from Americans. They're taking jobs that Americans don't want to fill.
Olivia, do you have anything to add, or do you want me to go into the next one?
I completely agree.
All right, so I think this is a really awesome question. This student wants to know, if I want to know more, I want to get good facts, I don't think I can do that from the media. Where do I go? And since you guys were researching this recently, where do they go?
Okay, I'll do this first, then I'll turn it over to you, Olivia. I also tell my students, we talk a lot about normative versus positive. So a normative statement is the way things ought to be, the way that you wish things were. For example, I could say abortion's wrong. If even one person had a different opinion than me, that's normative. That is my opinion. So if someone can argue that actually abortion is not wrong, then that is called a normative statement. Someone else has an opinion different than mine. So what we always want to use is positive statements, statements that can be backed up by fact. So I tell my students, question everything, even things that I say. So always be looking for spin in the media. So just because you read it in the paper, just because you hear it on the radio, just because Google tells you something, that does not make it so. So it is up to you to go in and to do research from credible sources, which is not Wikipedia. You go in and you look for credible sources on both sides of the spectrum, and then you can make a qualified decision. But don't ever base your decision on something that someone else tells you. You guys always need to be doing your own research, and then you come up with an educated decision that you can then back up and you can defend. So if you can't defend your position, you basically don't even have one. Olivia?
That was great explanation over research, because that's something that like I said before, I mentioned before over my students, that they have to always question what they see, because like I tell them, I give you these statistics for you to see, like for instance, okay, there's all these 11.5 immigrants, let's deport them all. And that's the thing, I always tell them, okay, well, if we deport them all, then, I mean, that's 10,854 they're going to spend on deporting each person. And they actually contribute $12 billion a year to our federal income. So And you would have to make those decisions like, okay, well, then who do we focus on deporting then? You know, do we deport the ones that actually have felonies or criminal activities on their background check or had a deportation removal? But the thing is that especially with immigration, you have to be really careful. I always, as you can see, my references, the sources in the bottom of every of my slides, I always try to use exactly from the source. Yes, I'll probably read articles, okay, like news articles. I mentioned the information, but then I always go back to the main source, which is like DHS, Department of Homeland Security, the justice.gov. Even sometimes some organizations, they are really informative and they even have the main source like Department of Homeland Security for you to always go back and make sure that information is correct.
Good points.
So if somebody is going to become a citizen, one of our students mentioned in the chat and another student mentioned it in the questions in the pre-survey, what does that citizenship test look like?
Which I always tell my students, most likely they're going to fail it if they try to take it because it's civics and history. They require for you to know who is your congressman, state level and federal level. And they ask you, what district do you belong to? And they will make sure if you know how to read, write, and verbally answer all those questions. So they want you to write down the question or the answer to the question, read the question, then answer it, and verbally say it as well. That's the thing. Like these exams, they are 100 questions. And like I said, it's civics and history. And the thing is like, they're only going to ask you 10. But if you, just by getting one wrong, it's up to the officer if he's going to pass you or not. And that citizenship application, let me remind you this, immigration fees went up. So that immigration-based application for citizenship, it's like an average of, I would say with all the fees and everything, you will end up paying $1,000 just for the application. Now, if you're paying someone to fill it out for you, that's another $1,200 that you're paying. And you only have 2 opportunities to pass that exam, like that interview with an immigration officer. And if you fail it, then you have to do all over again the whole process.
Oh, wow. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and say, if you guys have any other questions y'all want to ask, go ahead and type them in. But I want to remind you guys that we do have elections coming up and the deadline to register is really, really, really soon. So if you're wanting to take part in these elections for this midterm, you have to have your registration done by October 9th. So that means it has to be in the mail by October 9th. That doesn't mean you're picking it up and filling it out on October 9th. It's in the mail by October 9th.
Well, where would you get an application to sign up to vote?
So the easy answer is to go to the post office.
Okay.
But if you happen to be in either my class or in Angela's class,
yes,
you can just come talk to us because
we are what are we?
Volunteer registrars.
We can register you guys to vote. So yeah, you can just come up here to connect and you can pick up an application and then we can turn it in for you. So please register to vote because, well, let me ask Olivia, does even one vote matter?
Yes, it
even
does.
One vote. Yes, it does.
A student is reminding us that public libraries also have those registration packets.
Great
and
point.
At least, I'm going to go ahead and say all of the TCC campuses have at least one volunteer deputy registrar on their campuses. So there is somebody at TCC somewhere that can get you registered to vote.
Yes.
And let's see. Austin asked a very silly question. And I'm only saying that because he works here. Austin said he heard that one party votes on Tuesday and one party votes on Wednesday. That is not true. Don't believe that. We always vote on Tuesdays.
Yes, please make sure. Please jot it down. I was like, put a reminder on your phone to go vote.
So if you're wanting to vote, the best way to do it, and I think I've said this in every single one of these webinars, go early vote. It's the easiest way to do it. You can get in and out super fast.
And you can vote anywhere.
In your county.
Yeah, you can vote anywhere in your county if you vote early.
If you wait till the day of, you have to go to your precinct, which can be kind of a pain sometimes. So early vote. If you want to come vote with us, we're going to go do the walk the vote or exercise our rights to vote. Trinity River is going to do one October 24th and 25th at the Connect campus, we are going to exercise our right to vote on November 1st and 2nd. And then the actual election day is November 2nd.
6th.
November 6th, because I
Yes.
can't read. That's amazing. I can vote, but I can't read.
So make sure, what we always say is if you don't vote, then you don't get to complain.
Yeah.
So go vote. And you guys, everyone listening to this, you are the generation that can make a difference. You guys are we're going to pass all of our problems on to you. So you guys need to take the reins and you need to vote. If you like the way the country's going, then you can vote for whoever's in office. If you don't like the way the country's going, then do your background and vote for who best represents you.
Okay, so there's a couple of student questions about voting that I want to go ahead and answer. So Jessica asked, how do I know if I'm already registered? And that is a fantastic question, because every now and then the voter records do get purged.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go to votetexas.gov and make sure that you're registered. It'll ask you your information. You'll type it in. It'll say, yes, you're registered. Way to go. Ashley said, I'm new to Texas. So where do I get that application? So public library, TCC, or the post office. You can't do it online in Texas. So don't try to do that. And then Austin asked, what's a good way to find out the key issues that my candidate stands for? So the easiest answer from my perspective is to get the League of Women Voters Guide. However, I'm going to do a little bit of self-promotion here. If you look at our last webinar, we said get involved in the democratic process. Dr. Leah Tarwater outlined a whole bunch of ways that you can find out what each candidate stands for. So I'd also direct you to go look at that webinar.
And also, if you are attending TCC, but you actually are from another state, you can sign up to absentee vote in whatever state you are a resident. So you will need to go to that state website and sign up to absentee vote.
Olivia, anything to add about voting?
Well, you could always fill it out online. It's just a lot more difficult. It's tedious. You have to print it out, put it in an envelope, find a stamp wherever you can, or go to the post office and pay for a stamp and mail it in.
Or just come here.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So lots of ways to do this. All right. So thank you, ladies, both for being here and for your time.
Thank you for
we
having
greatly
us.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Students who've attended this live, give me about 5 minutes and then you can refresh this page and I'll put the link to fill out the survey to get credit for attending at the bottom. If you're attending late, if you're watching this after tomorrow at 7 p.m., talk to your professor about how you're going to get credit. So if you're in my class, you're going to write a little paragraph about it. If you're in Angela's class,
I usually just ask you some questions just to verify that you actually did watch the whole video.
So depending on who you have, it might be a little bit different, but if you're watching it within the next 24 hours, that link will be live and active and you can get credit that way. All right. Thank you guys for attending. It's been fun.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.